Good old Johnny B had started a revolution with his pocket pistol in 1899. Manufacturers around the world wanted a piece of this growing market. But they'd have to avoid his patent somehow. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the German Dreyse 1907 pistol. Let's take a look in the light box. Weighing in at only 1.5 pounds and at 6 1/3 inches long, this is actually a handy little pocket pistol, definitely in that class with the FN 1900. Has a magazine capacity of 7 rounds. They feed from a detachable single stack box with a heel release. As usual, I have to put this gun down for a second, and we have to talk about someone else. This handsome gentleman is Johann Nicholas von Dreyse. Now, he was born in 1787. He would live until 1867, so a lot sooner than this gun came out. So as you can tell, he didn't actually design it. Instead, he's famous for his 1841 needle rifle. Now, this is a big deal, and it launches his company, Waffenfabrik von Dreyse. Dreyse's name was a household one at this point, and that's really important because it's going to get bought. You see, the Mauser 1871 rifle, which we're semi-familiar with in this series, well, it displaces the needle gun, and so the family factory falls on hard times, and by 1901 it's struggling. So it's bought out by a lot of German words. Let's try this together, and I don't want any complaints from you guys. Rheinische Metallwaren und Maschinenfabrik of Zermörda. Now, this company, RM&M from now on, because I'm not trying that again, they buy up the Waffenfabrik von Dreyse, but they're really buying the name, and they start slapping it on their best products for marketability. After that, though, I mean, we're done with Dreyse. So, yes, it's the Dreyse 1907 pistol. It's just branding, okay? The real inventor was actually Louis Schmeisser. Now, Schmeisser, you guys should know him, born in 1848. He's pretty famous in pistol and rifle design, machine gun design. His sons are also famous, Hugo and Hans. They're going to go on to do great things. But for now, let's turn back the clock to 1891. He's working underneath a big name that we know as Theodore Bergmann. Now, for Bergmann, he's working on the first blowback pistols, really. As a matter of fact, it's sort of debatable whether he came up with the first blowback at all. He certainly had a patent for it. We'll get there in just a second. But he was beaten just barely by the Dormus. Actually, let's mention that patent now. It's real quick. You see, Schmeisser had already patented the blowback. He sent in the application. Bergmann didn't really remember to pay the fees, so they missed out on a very lucrative patent because, next thing we know, 1899, John Browning rolls out his pocket pistol. Regardless, Schmeisser would help his employer develop the Bergmann 1896 series of pistols, including the 5mm pocket model, a first in concept which also preceded Browning's 1899. He also likely had a strong hand in both the Bergmann Simplex and Mars pistols, which appeared after the 1896 proved to be too much for a civilian and a little too little for the military. Now, around 1905-1906, Louis Schmeisser is going to leave Bergmann and head over to RM&M. Remember, they've already bought the Dreyse name. So, now they have a famous name, they have an excellent semi-automatic handgun designer, and they're going to turn their attentions together to pocket pistols because, like we said with that FN 1900 episode, that's the growing market. That is the boomtown for handgun development. This early patent shows a simplex-like pistol with a hinged frame and inset breech block retained by a mass at the front. Also, a cocking indicator pin. Below, we can see the same idea applied to a handgun with a magazine in the grip. One that in profile looks very familiar to people watching this episode. It also sports a separate bolt face, which will carry over into our gun that we're talking about today. This patent in Schmeisser's name, it provides for a couple of things if you read the text. The number one thing is that he seems to be concerned about safety. And so what he's done is that mass that's on the front end of the breech block, it's tilted into the top of the action. And the action breaks open, yes, for cleaning, yes, for clearing jams, but also there's really just an element of this is the easiest way to get this new breech block in and out of the action, okay? So he's got a breech block that tilts in, turns up, and then locks in. And the reason for that is so that that mass at the front of the patent will prevent the breech block from coming all the way out the rear bodily. It will set into the frame. It's very containable. It's very strong. It's not like those cross screws on the FN 1900 or the yoke on the Long and Han that we've seen before. Okay, so that's his big focus though. Safety and then yes, some convenience. Now, the next two patents we're going to see are both under the name of R, M, and M, but they're obviously done by Schmeisser. As a matter of fact, the American versions have Schmeisser's name all over them. Filed in February 1908, many people think of this as the first Dreyse pistol patent, but if we look closely, yes, it uses a concentric recoil spring and what will be a familiar trigger and sear mechanism, but it also has an actual full slide and attached breech block, just like the 1900. Instead of being sent by two screws, it is fixed by a bayonet-style push and turn arrangement. Note the separate bolt face is gone, but the cocking indicator from the previous patent remains. Now, while that patent was granted in Germany, unlike just about all the other Schmeisser and RMM patents, I can't find a record of it in any other country, which means it probably wasn't granted in other countries, most likely because it very clearly infringed on Browning's 1899 slide. So, instead, by summer of that same year, we're going to see a new patent. One that, when you look at it, is very obviously the gun that is in my hand. We've kept the basic shape and trigger group, but now the safety breech block is back, along with the bolt face. This apparently also skirts Browning's patent on a slide because, well, honestly, it's not a slide. It's much more of a cocking arm. And with that, we now have the model 1907 Dreyse. I suppose Schmeisser was working on it the year beforehand. Alright, let's go ahead and get a closer look at just what makes up this gun, though. First things first, let's talk about this slide. In reality, this is something more along the lines of a cocking bar, because it's directly affixed to the breech block, and it's not really wrapping around the action of the gun. It skirts that Browning patent, okay? It also has some more utility to it beyond just being able to operate the gun. Remember, the first patent, and let me get this oriented, was to have just a short one of these so that it could impact the frame back in here in order to be safer for the shooter. So when this comes back, it's stopped bodily by the frame. Well, this is great. And it's extremely safe, and if you noticed, it's been rounded out to give even more surface area to really distribute that impact. It's really thoughtful, it's a really good idea, and it does its job very well. Also though, by throwing this up over the top, the original versions of these, they weren't even milled out. They were just a solid bar right across the top, lots of extra weight. And the reason for that is because being a blowback pistol, we only have two things we can really rely on in order to keep the action sealed up until all the gases vent out the correct hole. Now that's going to be the spring pressure and the mass of the breech block. Well, if you have a massive breech block at the rear of the gun, it's going to throw off your balance on the gun, and it's going to mean that you have a lot of breech block coming out the back of the gun. In order to keep this compact and handy, Schmeisser put the weight at the front. He just went ahead and ran an extension up over the top. So it's safer and it adds more mass. And by lengthening it and everything and getting it in this position and setting grooves in it, we now have something to grip to operate the breech block easily. So point 3, this is a great and efficient system. It's beautiful. And we'll actually see this mass forward of the breech block on other guns like the Winchester 1905, all the way up until there's a more recent Ruger Police carbine that does this. Alright, so we should probably look at the disassembly on this gun. So if we look at this lever back here, the first thing you need to know, right now you can see that it's decocked because we're on take 2. Sorry guys, I can't always get everything right the first time. But we're going to check this chamber before we go any further. Normally I don't do this on camera, but we're going to have to pull the trigger on this gun. So I'm going to look inside that chamber. I know you guys can't see it all that well, but I can, and that's what's important. It's clear. Then we have to drop the trigger. Well, the reason we have to do this is because when this firing pin is back, the tab below it that sets up against the sear in there, it also interrupts the path of this lever. So you can't actually unlock the action on one of these without firing it. So that's out of our way, and now I can release the lever, will hinge her open. All right, if we look inside, I've already removed the magazine. We have our disconnector here. This is a later addition to these guns. We'll get into that in a moment. We have our sear, all that good stuff. To further disassemble the gun, it gets a little bit tricky because we have to get a hold of this bayonet ring. Now, you can take a punch or another tool and use this tab here to push that down and then release the slide. However, I find that to be incredibly hard, and you better watch your own eyes. Like, wear eye protection when disassembling this gun. This spring really wants to go. What I've done is I've gone over to the hardware store and just grabbed a little brass coupler. That way we're not marring it up, and it's a lot easier to use. Still, technically a challenge. I'm going to line it up with the ring and shove it. You're not going to get to see a lot of this on camera because I got to get my palm in there so that I don't send a spring flying. But let me just get her aligned, push, and then I'm going to lift the cocking arm out of the way. I'll show you in just 1 second because I'm desperately controlling that stiff spring. There we go. So what I did, just to review, is I pushed in on this guy and I lifted up. I lifted away with that arm. Make sense, guys? Good. So if I give myself some room, you can see, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep this in camera, we can just twist this guy out. And with a little tugging, we're free to go. So I think we understand this part well enough, so I'm going to set it aside. Let's get a look at that breech block. Just like I said, short, compact, handy breech block, lots of extra weight across the front, very firmly attached to each other, milled from the same piece essentially. This is a great setup, very safe, lots of weight. The weight is forward to keep that weight up on the barrel, to keep the gun balanced. Genius. All right, so while I'm this far in, I would like to point out one other thing that's kind of interesting if you think about it with this gun. We now have a two-piece hinged frame in which our bolt group is in the upper and our trigger group and magazine is in the lower. For a lot of you at home, that probably just clicked home, so I just thought you guys might enjoy that. Getting back to the history, the first buyer for this pistol is going to be the Royal Saxon Gendarmerie. The first 700 or so pistols will be marked KSGEND. They have a solid operating block, not milled into a trough like the one we've been showing. Likely, this added more weight and helped with recoil. It also meant it needed taller sights. The serrations on that cocking bar were raised up off the bar. Now, there's going to be numerous changes over the life cycle of the Dreyse. Honestly, a lot of them overlap each other. They come and go in weird little fits and spurts. We're going to cover most of them by taking some snapshots, just of particular serial number ranges. Don't count this as gold standard because, like with everything, there's little exceptions. If you want to know more about your Dreyse, you have one, you should talk to Ed Buffalo over at the Unblinking Eye. He's been doing some great survey work with them and is working on really honing in on when each change occurred. So go ahead and follow the link that's down in our description and let him know what gun you have, what features it has, and its serial number. Moving on, by serial 55,000, that trough will have appeared, although that appeared after the first 700. The Dreyse will be branded on the side, the Dreyse. The serrations will be raised and overlap the frame some. Also, by this point, we still don't have an internal disconnector or a lanyard ring. By serial number 180,000, the serrations are back on the rod alone, not overlapping, and they're now milled down into the metal. The disconnector has appeared along with the lanyard loop. And we have grip screws. By serial 230,000, the Dreyse has a new teardrop contour to the rear sight. The serrations are now diagonal and milled into the rod. Also, the takedown notch under the barrel has been omitted. By serial 245,000, we have raised diagonal serrations. Everything else is mostly the same. Alright, that's a lot to digest, so let's go ahead and get a look at the action before getting any deeper into this gun. I'll take the time to reassemble the pistol. This is a fairly simple single-action striker-fired pistol, so there isn't a lot for me to point out. I will say though, if you notice that as we pull the trigger through, it drives that firing pin a little bit further back before releasing it. This was not always a feature. It was added at some point and much later taken away. It seems to have been done to deal with military hard primers. While we're here, we might as well note that the cocking indicator is just a pin sticking out of the back of the striker. The safety for this gun simply blocks the sear from tipping back, preventing fire. Take note of the positive disconnector. This was a later addition. It meets up with a milled spot in the breech block. You know, these two features not always included on every Dreyse, so if you have an early one, you might not have them in your gun. Alright, let's get this over to Mae.
We'll load up the magazine and work the bar. The safety is extremely stiff to switch on, but light to switch off. All right, let's slow this down. Nice. Back to Othais.
You know, we always thank Mae for shooting, but this time around I think she actually enjoyed herself. The Dreyse is weirdly fun to play with. I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable gun, but it's fun. We need to cover, though, some problems with the design. So we already talked in the animation about the fact that we were getting some light strikes, so they went ahead and modified the sear to push that striker just a little bit further back and then release it. Well, that's not the only problem. That was resolved, obviously, nice and easy. Another issue that came up was the fact that it really needed a disconnector. As a matter of fact, I've been scratching my head over the diagrams because I don't have one without a disconnector. I can't figure out mechanically how they reset the trigger on that thing without a positive disconnector in this gun. If you own one that's pre-disconnector and you can explain it to us, great. Make a video, we'll link you out. But as for me, I imagine it was just a matter of you had to release the trigger or else it was going to slam back forward again. Anyway, they added a positive disconnector. That cleaned things up pretty quickly. Good, +1. We've seen that in the animation. Another issue is a little bit harder to explain, so let's go ahead and get a closer look. Now, remember, we're not supposed to be able to throw this latch if the firing pin is back, okay? I'm sorry, I got big fingers, it ruins everything. But we've got our firing pin back. We have our latch here. The fear is that you will somehow thumb stroke this, it'll get caught in a holster or fabric, and you'll have one in the chamber, and if the latch is allowed to open, it's going to disconnect the sear from that striker, and we're going to have it discharge. Well, there's a tab in there that is meant to line up with the striker. You can see it if you go back to the animation. It's pretty clear that it sticks up and over. The problem is it seems to be a wearable part because in our example here, just for an instance, boom. Now, that is probably one of the biggest explanations for why this gun would eventually be dropped, because I feel like with that part, it's going to wear out, it's going to become a problem, and it's going to happen at some point that you end up with a truly accidental discharge. That little nastiness aside, we know that the gun served with Saxony, but who else used it? Well, civilian sales were good. The gun was produced from 1908 to 1918 with 250,000 made. That's a fairly big number, especially for a pocket pistol out of Europe. But as good and popular as it was with the people, realistically, a large number of them went to military and police contracts, with, probably close to half being consumed by the German army in World War I. These were offered for sale internally at 34 marks. Austria-Hungary also used the Dreyse, and they will be marked with the WN-date acceptance mark. But more than the military powers, realistically, the German police just snapped these things up. They love them. And they're going to stay in police and some military use into the 1940s. By then, they're starting to be displaced, though. We've got other designs coming out from Walther and things like that. They're going into storage. And they'd stay in storage realistically until the latter days of World War II, when you have things like the Volkssturm kicking up, and guns are sort of being turned out wherever they can be found. And so, a lot of these guys end up in Germany proper right at the closing of the war, right when Allied troops are rolling in. And if you haven't noticed, they're fairly easy to pocket, and so they became a favorite souvenir of Americans returning home. And that's why, realistically, despite never really being imported to the United States, they're really common in the United States collector market to this day, because they were all just carried over in huge numbers. It's like the Arisaka of Europe. Anyway, we should probably talk about one other model, which is the same standard Dreyse that was sold over to the Pope's Swiss Guards way back in 1912. The reason I bring it up, though, even though there were only 30 of them, is because, frankly, they're fantastic service life. They weren't retired until 1990. Before we bring in Mae, I'll also briefly mention that there was a 9mm version. Now, this was produced in very small numbers with an eye for military contracts. It was still a blowback action, and so that requisite spring was so strong, they had to add a cocking lever, which still didn't help much with actually operating the gun. We'll leave it at that, though, because hopefully we'll turn one of these up for more detail later. For now, let's go ahead and drag Mae in here to talk about this 32 version. Alright, we made some room, rearranged the furniture, yada yada yada, I put on pants, and now we have Mae to give her opinion on actually shooting the Dreyse pistol. So let's start where we always start. How did you feel about the ergonomics, the handling?
Thanks. So first impressions of this gun is that it is incredibly top heavy. I mean, it feels like all the weight is up here and none is down here in the grip. I mean, you can even look at it and just tell that all the mass is up here while none is at the bottom. Now, when shooting this gun, the bar slams back up here into the top of the gun itself, right above my grip, which I feel doesn't really help with the recoil. Don't get me wrong, on this gun the recoil I found was manageable. They added a low bore access, the breech block is big, they tried to make it easy to manage. However, I just feel like they could have gone a little step further with it if just maybe they considered redistributing the weight so that when this bar came back, it didn't cause as much of a whip in the gun for the recoil itself. Adding to that, I would also say that the grip itself is a little bit short, so it feels like it just doesn't want to fit all the way into the palm of my hand. It doesn't come quite far enough down, I feel, to help me get that little bit of leverage to help manage the whip itself. So it kind of feels like with the low bore axis and the big breech block, they went 2 steps forward and then 1 step back in terms of weight distribution and the shorter grip. But that's how I feel. Next, I'd probably talk about the magazine itself. I'm not a big fan of heel releases. This one in particular was the most difficult one for me to date. I would say because this little tab in here that you're supposed to pinch for the mag release, it's really short and fairly thin. Kind of feels like you want to pinch your thumb with it. The toe of the mag itself, it barely protrudes out from the gun, so it's hard to get a good grip on it. And this mag itself is just, we found it was fairly stiff to operate on range, so when pulling it out, it didn't want to give. It was a real buzzkill, in my opinion. Next I'll talk about is the bar. The bar itself, like, don't get me wrong, these serrations right here are fairly deep, and there are enough of them that it feels like I'm able to get a good grip on it. The bar is a little stiff, but again, the serrations help with that. However, I do not like the fact that I have to come up here towards the muzzle of the gun. This is the danger zone. I don't want to go anywhere near it, but yet they've made me have to go near it to actually operate it. So it's not my favorite, but it was manageable. The last thing I'll probably talk about is the safety on this gun. It's really stiff, which made it incredibly difficult to one-hand on. However, one-handing off, not too bad. But yeah, overall ergonomics of this gun, it's a little bit awkward. I feel like they could have done a few things better.
Yeah, if you're at home and you haven't handled a Dreyse and you're looking at it and you think, God, that looks awkward, you're right, it's awkward. Mae?
Yeah.
I agree with Mae. It's top heavy. It feels, especially in my hand, I mean, good Lord, I can't, my whole pinky's done for. And that's okay. There's pocket pistols that are small. I have to roll the pinky. But those small pocket pistols don't put all that mass at the top like this gun. So she's dead on in my opinion on this. The trouble with that is that you think, okay, then it must be a terrible shooter. It feels like it wants to worm out of your hand. I mean, the only benefit is just how deeply set your hand is. That really does help eat up some of it. However, let's go ahead and get Mae to explain to us how she did shooting it. And on this one, several of us decided to play with this gun on the range, and you would be surprised. Here.
Thanks. So shooting this gun, let's actually talk about the trigger first. Let's start there. The trigger on this gun I thought was, it wasn't really clean, it wasn't muddy, it was middle of the road, it was average. There was nothing really exceptional about it. However, I can kind of feel in there a little bit of resistance when I'm pushing against that striker in here. I would love to try one of the earlier models to see if there was any sort of difference, see if maybe the earlier ones are a little bit cleaner. But it was just really, there was nothing really exceptional about it. Now the sights on this gun, I thought were very easy to read. I didn't have any misalignment problems. I thought I shot really well with these sights. I thought I was able to realign quickly. However, I could see how someone would accidentally realign with one of the tops of these troughs on the bar and maybe misshoot. I could see how that would be an option. That being said, I will say that not just me, but everyone else on range with us that day drilled a hole with this gun. Everyone was accurate with it. It was a pleasant shooter. Like, it was magical, honestly.
I can't lie. You grab this gun and you think, let's see what's going to happen. There's no confidence in it from the first pickup, at least not for me or anybody else that was playing with it before we got there. But there's nobody, not the worst shooter in the crew, couldn't just nail the old ring with this thing. I mean, may I?
Yeah.
Awkward, lumpy. You instantly feel like it's too short. You instantly feel like it's too top heavy. You instantly feel uncomfortable. And yet, just blam, 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 all under control, all nice and tight, and you still aren't really sure why that worked. It's a confluence of things that shouldn't and yet do. But I can't say that there's any of us that don't kind of love the Dreyse after shooting it. Maybe it was a lucky day, maybe it was good weather, maybe we were in good spirits, or maybe this gun just, I don't know, it just functions. So I guess with that praise, with all the faults and with all the pros, we got to get you to that classic question. How would you feel in the trenches of World War I if you were issued the Dreyse?
So if I were actually handled the Dreyse on the battlefield, I think I would do okay with it, honestly. Like, I feel like on range, I was accurate with it. All the negatives we listed aside, it shot well. I shot well with it. Everyone did. Now, granted, at that time, I do know now, of course, that there are better options available for me, and also being 32, it's not my preferred gun in war. However, I would take it to battle with me if I were given it, because I know that I would be okay with it, that I would be able to rely on it. And of course, it didn't show it in video, but the gun didn't have any malfunctions on range. It was perfect.
So there you have it. This might be the worst gun to get a solid yes out of May. Well, I guess, this isn't the longest episode, I understand, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. There's plenty of these things out there, so I'm sure more than a few of you have encountered them. But as always, updates are after the credits. We thank you all for being here, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks, plus whatever little updates we manage to get out in the meantime.
Thanks, everyone.
Just a quick update this time. Number one, for those of you who wanted t-shirts, I'm sorry to say they're unavailable temporarily. We just weren't really getting what we needed done with our current provider, so we're looking for a new one. If you make t-shirts and want to help out, by all means, pop us an email with your details. Also, I'm sure everybody's excited about the DrakeGmbH still. Our range, as I'll remind you, was underwater for some time. It's back in operation. We're going to try again this week to get some filming done. We are going to be limited by the weather to some degree, though, so fingers crossed. With only 5 rounds, I can't afford to do this wrong and go back and reshoot it the next week like we have with some other guns. So it's got to be right, and it's got to be right the first time. Let's see. Oh, thank all of you, because our Patreon level is at 1131. That's $20 up from last time around. That will deflate a little bit at the beginning of the month, so it might even start deflating by the time you guys see the video. Usually some supporters come in every month and sort of reinflate it, so it's just a constant growth thing against the sort of cash outs. Also, I should probably thank Drake specifically, because he's been a real big help behind the scenes when we've been trying to coordinate with the Great War and everything. And he's been rushing me ammo photos and getting us anti-tank rifle cartridges into, editable state and things like that. So thank you, Drake. You're a big help. We really appreciate you. And not that we don't appreciate everybody else, but just today's his nod. Everybody thank Drake. Otherwise, things are running pretty smoothly. I'm a little busy, but that's how it goes. I hope you guys are enjoying the animations every other week. I'm going to try to keep brushing those up and rolling them back out. There may be a bit of a slowdown because some of them aren't built the same as others because of time requirements back when we were working on them at that time. Basically, not all of them are looped, and I'll have to go in and sort of reconstruct what I was doing at the time to get them to loop. The other thing is, for those of you who don't have us on Facebook, you could also follow us on Imgur. I'll try to post it there, but we've been doing some little throwback photos if you care about those. It's just showing some of these firearms in their place in the war. All right, that's really it. So thank you all, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks.